As time continues on, we're becoming more and more involved with the technology we're creating. Computers went from being the size of classrooms to being able to fit in the palm of your hand. And this isn't to mention the vast improvements along the way. Your phone is a computer millions of times faster than the ones that we used to put humans on the moon. From reading about stories, to listening to them alongside the radio, to watching them live on television. Digital experiences are becoming more and more interactive as the years go on. We're being able to stimulate more and more senses, and it's getting harder to tell our own created illusions from reality. So what happens when we're able to simulate reality so well, and we create an environment that is indistinguishable from the real world? And what happens if once we're in, we don't want to go back? Although we hear about it pretty often now, most people still don't exactly know what VR actually is. Think of virtual reality as a portal into any world that we can create, a simulated reality. Any world we can deeply model and generate using computers could also be made to be explored by us humans. Virtual realities allow us to actually become part of the worlds we make, where we can touch and move things, where we can put ourselves in situations that we most likely otherwise wouldn't be in. Want to go to the peak of Mount Everest? You can. Want to go to space? No problem. Any idea, any location, any reality can be created and be fully immersed into. Now today, most virtual realities are accessed via headsets. There's Oculus, Google Cardboard, HTC Vive, and that's just to name a few. But how do these things work? Well, it's all thanks to human biology. And by that, I mean having two eyes. You see, the reason why we can perceive depth so well is all because of our two eyes. Although you can't really tell, each one of your eyes sees the world in different ways. This small difference makes all the difference. Your brain takes inputs from both of your eyes and merges them together, while also subconsciously blocking out some parts where they overlap. Virtual reality headsets mimic this blocking by giving each of your eyes a different view of the world. These headsets also have accelerometers and gyroscopes inside them, which is what is able to track your head movements as you enter virtual reality. And being able to experience something as interesting and immersive as this for as low as $15 is kind of unreal. This sounds great and all, but what's the point of it? For example, when training NASA astronauts or fighter pilots, chances are you're not going to want to train them using actual rockets and jets on the first go around. It's extremely risky, and there's a risk of not losing only a life, but tens of millions of dollars due to human error and inexperience. This is where VR comes in and saves the day. We can put these people into realistic situations without actually having to do it. We can train astronauts, pilots, surgeons, and others to help hone their crafts without having to suffer the drastic consequences of failure. Medical students can use virtual reality to practice dangerous surgical procedures without actually putting anyone's life at risk. Mistakes aren't life-threatening, and learning becomes much easier and less stressful. Virtual reality can also be used to improve mental health as well. For people who suffer from different forms of anxiety, VR can provide cheap and simple solutions. For example, someone who struggles to speak in front of large audiences can use virtual reality environments to help train themselves for situations in the real world. They can start by talking to one person, and then progressively continue expanding until it becomes easy for them. VR allows us to do things that we just can't do in our reality. In one study, patients with a fear of heights were placed in a simulated VR environment and were then asked to jump from a cliff. Being able to go to these extremes is something that we haven't ever been able to do before. But VR opens up this new lane, and we can use it to solve previously unexplored problems. As VR technology continues to improve, these simulations will get closer and closer to mimicking reality as we know it. Imagine a world where you can learn about the universe by actually moving through it. The educational uses are almost limitless, and the potential upside is enormous. But how realistic is all of this? One of, if not the most important parts of virtual reality, is presence. When you're playing a video game, you know you're not actually in the game. There's a lack of realism, of involvement. You don't feel like you're actually there. Your brain is pretty good at being able to tell whether or not something is real, so being able to trick the brain into believing you're in a virtual environment and reacting to things as if you were in the real world is a necessity. Without this, VR is practically useless. Virtual reality is still a rather new idea, and is just now starting to be executed. Eventually, your brain will be tricked into believing that every smell, touch, or taste is actually real. Achieving true and ultimate presence is going to be extremely difficult. But it isn't impossible. Although the human brain is smart and extremely attentive to details, it's pretty easy to trick. The best and most realistic virtual worlds will most likely be ones that can mimic how our brains function while we're dreaming. Dreaming is one of the things that makes humans so incredible. Our brains can create such deep and realistic stories from our memory. These dream stories have spawned some of the greatest forms of entertainment and are even accountable for some of the biggest theories that explain our universe. For all we know, our dreams could be limitless. The number of scenarios and realities that we could create and live in is pretty much the same. This would be a world where we aren't limited by our physical bodies. Some would say they're creating their own destiny. Others would say it's escaping from reality. Assuming we manage to continue to advance VR technology year after year at an exponential rate, there seems that there's inevitably going to be a day in the distant future where our virtual worlds seem just as complex as our day-to-day reality. Realities that, once we enter, are better and more enjoyable than the real world. Places that used to be an escape from reality have finally become permanent settlements of sorts. Maybe one day we will have so many different realities that it's normal for everyone to have some sort of life in these worlds. We would work, play, and have different lives in these worlds. It may eventually even become weird to stay in the real world. If we're able to build these places and fully immerse ourselves to where we can't tell that we're in a simulated reality, we just might find out that we aren't going back.